Hey folks, this is Matt J. Rainwater once again, colorist of the Plants vs. Zombies comics published by Dark Horse. And today we're going to go into the second step, or I say second step, the second part of my tutorial on flatting. Basically, I'm going to talk more about working through flatting, getting through, like, finishing flatting a page. Last time we talked about everything dealing with just going through coloring characters first, which is part of my process. I go in and I will go through a bunch of pages and flat all the characters first. So, like, I done Zomboss in every single page. I've done Nate and Patrice in every single page. Just flatted them out, made sure that they're set in, and then I move on to the backgrounds and everything else in the panels that are basically stuff that I get to make the decisions about what color they're going to be. Of course, not always. Sometimes there are notes from the writer or notes from the line artist that dictate, like, hey, Matt, we want this thing to be orange. Or, like, I remember in the Battle Extravaganza book, there was a part that I had missed initially before I went back and did like revisions, where there was there was like a food cart in the background that was called Duck à l'Orange, and it was just, like, the duck was supposed to be orange, and there was a lot of ducks in that book, so I colored a lot of the ducks a very similar color. Missing, and initially I had also colored that duck a similar color, missing the fact that that duck was supposed to be orange. So I ended up going back and fixing that. So anyway, that's just an example of, like, things you can miss if you don't go very thoroughly through your scripts before you color. So this is actually a finished page, like finished flatted page. These flats are pretty much at the point where I don't need to make any changes to the colors. I'm good to go. Like, I can start doing shading and other effects to, make a more refined looking comic book page. Although, as is, it looks pretty nice, right? But it can totally look even nicer. So let's just look at what that looks like all together. This pink, by the way, is, remember that background color I told you all about when we first started flatting? That's that pink. That basically just helps kind of make sure that there is color behind the line art when I send it in to Dark Horse, and pre-press will have my hide if there is not some sort of color trapped behind all of the line art. I'm not going to argue with pre-press. They make all those decisions. That's not my business. So let's get started. Basically what I want to do is I want to finish flatting a panel with y'all. And before I do that, I want to check some things. All right, I got my bucket, my fill bucket, and I'm going to go into the options for my fill bucket, and I'm going to make sure that area scaling is on so that it fills up a couple of pixels outside of the initial range of the line art. And I forgot to mention this the last video. Whenever you're flatting, whatever tool you're using, make sure that anti-aliasing is checked off. Well, let me show you what anti-aliasing does. Let's go to the page that we want to work on. Here we go. So anti-aliasing. Oh, also, here we go. Refer line art. Anti-aliasing is. This is the best way that I know how to describe it. It's essentially. It essentially means that it's pixelated. It's rasterized. It's whatever selection you're using, whether it's, like a lasso tool or it's a fill bucket, whatever shape it creates is going to have a pixelated edge. So let's zoom in here. See that? And by pixelate, I mean there's a variation of tone, of color. Which works fine if you're editing photos. But if you're coloring a comic book, does not work fine. Because when I go to select this color space, there's all these pixels here that don't get selected. And I need all these pixels selected. And if I don't have them all selected, you get what's the best way of putting this? If you're doing shading, if you're just trying to, okay, granted in this example, right? You're not going to actually see any of it, but trust me on this. It's very important. You're not going to see... Okay, so you're not going to be able to select all of your colors, right? And you want to be able to select all of it in case you need to go back to it later. And so that's why we want to make sure anti-aliasing is always checked off. Where is it? I want to check it off. Checked off. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of it. Let me show you what it looks like anti-aliasing checked off. Let's use the same color. Okay. There you go. It's just those two colors side by side. So when I go to select it, it selects the whole thing. All right. So this is the panel that I wanted to color with y'all today. And this is really a perfect panel to work on because it's all background. It's all, like, Zomboss has already been taken care of. All I need to do is to fill in all the background elements. So let's start here with this wagon in the background. I'm going to pick like a brown color, and I'm going to keep it all one color, except for maybe the windows. And I will embellish on these colors later on when I go into the later phases of coloring, when I'm applying gradients, when I'm applying shading, all that stuff. But right now I want to keep this pretty much all one color except for this window here. I'm assuming it's a window. It's certainly like an entry into, it's some sort of space into the wagon. But my general tip when flattering is to keep it simple, keep it to as few colors as possible. If you're coloring background characters, my advice, like characters that are just, you know, extras, use at most 3 colors per person. So, you know, like skin tone. Oh, I should say, okay, maybe that's 4 colors per person. So skin tone and then 3 colors for whatever clothes they're wearing. Well, maybe it's 5, now that I think about it. At most 5, because then you also have hair color, right? Although inevitably it's more like 6, because then there's also eyes and teeth, which I use the same color for the eyes for the teeth. I mean, it's white, you know, I don't know. Certainly, if you're daring enough to use a separate color for eyes and teeth, which technically, if you know, in real life would look that way. But since this is cartoons and comic book, you know, like very cartoony comic book, I typically try and spare down on the complication and make things that are very close in color about the same color, at least when it comes to like tongues and gums, teeth, eyes, especially with the zombies, since they're all kind of the same. Anyway, there's certainly situations where that's different. And for example, like with pirate characters, like in previous books, like with Chessbeard the pirate and his crew, I have used like more of a yellow color for their teeth to sort of imply like, oh, they have tooth decay because they're pirates and they're on the ship and they don't really brush their teeth that often. Um, but maybe that's not fair to pirates. That's something I should think about. Anyway, moving on. So yeah, I colored this tree in the background. I'm gonna make it kind of a bluish color. I mentioned in the last video that I was going to talk a little bit about color theory, and that's not actually true because what I was thinking about in terms of color theory, I'm actually going to talk about in a later video concerning using gradients and using basically, like, for lack of a better term, washes to create atmosphere and to create. I'm going to go back here and refer. I want to keep the sky color about the same. What was I saying? To use gradients and to use like washes to create layers of distance and perspective. Oops. This is all white. This isn't that blue that I needed. Yeah, once you start doing stuff like sky, the page or the panel starts to fill up fast. And you feel like you're making much better time than you thought you were originally. It's why I often will try and like save doing like big patches of color for later on to get myself sort of to get my morale up, because oftentimes after flatting like all the characters and stuff, I get into this point where I'm feeling like, oh, this is so hard, it's taking so long, how am I gonna keep up with my deadline, blah blah blah. And so I have things like that where I'm like, oh, okay, maybe it's not so bad, I'm actually making pretty good speed on this. See, so I want it to be purple. I want these flags to be purple, green, and white. Kind of, or maybe like a yellowish white. Kind of zombie-ish color. Kind of, well, reflective of zombie colors used in past books. Especially what I keep in mind are the what was it, was it Zombie Tech or Zombie University in the Bully for You book series, or book, not necessarily book series. So that's something I often refer back to because I don't know, from a story perspective, those are colors that are synonymous with Zomboss's past, and I think about it in the same way that I think about like people that I've known who are really into their college, or of course part of the storyline is that Zomboss really wasn't. Well, anyhow. So, filling up these flags. I'm going to use a purple, I'm going to use a green. It's the thing that I've learned about working on this comic series is that um, there's so many different possible interpretations that you can apply a color palette to the story, and I want to try and create some kind of narrative consistency with the colors that I choose. Because like like for this circus situation, like I really could use whatever colors that I wanted. But I want it to be resemblant of colors used in past books. And I want it to be resemblant of I want it to call to memory stuff from past books so that there is like this larger narrative involved, even if it's not, even if all these books are kind of dissociated from each other in any kind of timeline or whatever. Although not entirely true, because at the very least, Bully for You seems to be the most narratively important book, simply because of Mr. Stubbins, who appears in every book afterwards. Which I think he is a great addition to the book series. Make that purple. Make this green. So I guess you did get a little color theorizing anyway. Not in the way that I intended. But that is definitely part of color, coloring theory. How can you use color to support narrative? How can you use color to recall and suggest things that are important to the story, important to the characters, in a very sort of subliminal way? Because that's sort of the function that color often serves, not just in comic books, but also in movies and graphic design. Color serves a purpose that is oftentimes, the metaphor that I like to use is that it's a lot like music in movies. It can supplement the emotional, like the emotional tone, or the action. It adds in a way that is not immediately, that is not like overtly apparent, but you register it in your mind, whether you're paying attention to it or not. Purple and green. That's what I'm going to do for this tint. And then I'm going to use this slightly yellowish white for this flap and that. And then I'm going to create stripes on this tint, and I'm going to probably use purple for the other stripe. So white and purple. Here we go. By the way, I am just checking to make sure area scaling is more than 0. Because sometimes I forget about that, and then I'm like, oh no! I didn't do it. I didn't turn on area, or I didn't put area scaling above 0, and now I don't have colors underneath the liner. What am I gonna do? Here we go. That's the one that I want to refer to. That's the tint I want to refer to. Oops. So, wow, yeah, I was able to get through this panel pretty fast. Oh, I still have this cane, which I haven't. I know Zomboss has it in a. I'm sure Zomboss is going to have it through the rest of this book too. I only have the first 24 pages of a total 72-page book, so I don't really have a good idea. I think I'm just going to make it all gold though. In fact, maybe I'll make it kind of the same goldish yellow that... do I want to do that? Let's try it. It's worth a try. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. This is another way to save yourself some time and to create consistency. Make sure that you reuse colors that you're using on your character. Like this goldish yellow is good enough, especially if you're use like shade. Like maybe I can use a slightly different color when I'm shading it or something to apply a more like more of a luster to it. I'm just gonna do this to kind of give you an idea. That's what I'm thinking. See what I mean? But yeah, that's my idea. I might not end up doing that though. We'll see. So I told y'all I was gonna do one panel, but maybe let's do one more since let's see how long we've gone. We're about 20 minutes in. Let's do a little bit more of this panel, the second panel of this page, and then we'll call it. Oops. Where do I want to start? That's the real question. I'm going to start with these curtains in the back. I'm almost always starting with the easier stuff first. Just to sort of let myself wade into the panel. Because it can be really overwhelming. Especially with a book like Plants vs. Zombies where on average any given panel has between 6 and 7 characters. So I like to start where it's, at times like these I like to start where there's not so much stuff to have to sort through and think about, and kind of start with easier things that I can do as like single colors. All right. And then next I'll go to the fire. So I think what I'll do is I'll focus on this hoop. I'm picking a sort of metallic, I don't know though. I'll use a metallic color for parts of this hoop, not all of it. And then use a darker color for these parts. And then next, let's we're gonna color this character who's just an extra. Start like that. And considering that the dress they're wearing is kind of like one thing, it'd be pretty easy to have it as one color. So I'm probably gonna go with like, I think like a green, like a light yellow green. Maybe like, yeah, that's a pretty good, like that. It's loud and gaudy. Let's see. And then have like, I'm gonna actually make the hair and that golden ring, or yeah, that bracelet the same color. Ideally, the character or the colors you use for characters, you want them to kind of go with each other. You want to use the colors in a way that it's they go together harmoniously. So I wouldn't feel inclined to use like red or anything like that's too contrasting with like the color of the dress. So like with this green and this yellow, I'm gonna try and stay around that yellow green range of colors, which is pretty easy to do in this situation since there's not too much variation, or there's not too much detail that I'm dealing with for this particular character. Oh. Pulling color from Nate's eyes. I actually, so the slightly blue white color that I use for the eyes for Nate, Patrice, Crazy Dave is also the same light blue or slightly blue white color that I use for all of the humans in Plants vs. Zombies and also for the plants. And then I have a different eye and teeth color for the zombies. Let's make it. I am going to end up using some reddish color for the lipstick. Cool. All right, let's fill in. I want that to be more of a brown. For the ground. I'm going to go in and fill in these shadows, which is going to take a minute. It's a little bit frustrating. All right, so yeah, I hope this gives you a good idea of what the flattening process is like. I'm gonna go on and finish this panel, and I'm gonna finish, of course, flattening the rest of these pages. I still have about 5 pages to go, And after I finish flattening these pages, we're gonna start talking about lighting effects, as well as additional effects like blush and atmospheric gradients, color holds, light reflection. What am I forgetting? There's a couple of texture that we may not go into that for this book series, but I probably should. Well, I'll figure a way to work that one in. So yeah, that's what's coming up next in these tutorials, and I will talk to you then. All right, bye.